Hi guys, it is Willow here, and today I'm going to talk about a very simple subject, but one that is actually quite complex, and that is what is astrology? Um, you know, when you're immersed in the world of astrology and you're immersed in these concepts and this language, you kind of start to forget that most people, the vast majority of people, don't have much astrological literacy at all and probably think that astrology is a bunch of bogus garbage. Not completely an unwarranted opinion, I will say, based on pop astrology. But I'm here to tell you about real astrology, okay? Soul astrology, astrology that can save lives. And that's the type of astrology that I practice. That's the only type of astrology I'm interested in. Because I'm a hardcore mama jama. And, anybody who reads my site should know that. I ain't going to be trifling, okay? I'm not going to be trifling with this fluffy, entertainment based astrology. Now, that has its place. Entertainment based astrology has its place. But real astrology, soul astrology, depth astrology, that's where it's really at, okay? That's where the real action is. And yeah, that's where the hard slog is, and that's where the thankless hours and days and years are. But ultimately, it's where the really powerful stuff is dealt with. Okay, so I will start off by saying that I am a professional intuitive astrologer. I'm self-taught. So that means that I have learned from other astrologers, from books that I've come into contact with, from other astrologers that I've come into contact with on the web, but I did not learn in a standardized type of way. I didn't learn from a particular astrological program or particular astrological teacher or school of thought, okay? So I basically carved out my own path as an autodidact, which is a fully viable path for an astrologer, okay? I will just put that out there. I'm not saying it's the best path, the only path, but what I'm saying is that it was my path. It was a path that was sacred and is sacred. It was a path that was, I believe, given to me, right? I was set out on that path, and no mere mortal has the ability to discredit that. Okay, so I'm gonna put that just straight out. I'm a plain talker, y'all. You know that, right? So, okay, the thing about it is, so the type of astrology that I practice is professional intuitive astrology, and it's also called Western tropical astrology. There are two main branches of astrology: Western tropical astrology, which is generally practiced in Canada and the US and Western European countries, let's say. And then there's sidereal astrology. And sidereal astrology is practiced more in India and Eastern countries like that. They're both valid. They're just different systems. And I'm not going to go into the details of the different systems because I don't want to bog this video down in too much astrological detail. But the basic difference is that sidereal astrology uses the physical constellations in the sky, and Western tropical astrology uses the solstices and the equinoxes basically as time points that we base the cycle, the natural cycle on. Now, astrology in very basic terms is a nature-based symbolic language. Okay, so Western tropical astrology, again, is what I'm speaking about. It is based on the cycles of nature. So there are 12 zodiac signs corresponding with the 12 months of the year. And we go through cycles where the transiting bodies, so the planets in our solar system, are in different signs at different times of the year. So it's sort of the idea that you never step into the same river twice. You never experience the same astrological day twice, okay? So you might experience, June 28th, 2018, June 28th, 2019, June 28th, 2020, etc., etc. But each June 18th is going to have a different mix of bodies, a different mix of signs, a different flavor, okay? And so this is basically what astrology is. So astrology is sort of a snapshot of the sky, and it's reading the bodies in particular signs. A natal chart, a birth chart, is basically the chart of the day that you were born, the day, time, and location that you were born. So it's a snapshot of the sky on the day, time, and location that you were born. The current placements, the transits, are what's going on right now. So it's always changing. The transits are always changing minute by minute, second by second, okay? So basically what an astrologer is doing is interpreting symbology, so interpreting symbols, and reading the language of these symbols, reading the insight of these symbols, and then sort of translating that into practical advice, practical navigation. Astrology ultimately is a navigational tool. Okay, so I know some people do predictive astrology, so they predict the events of your life with astrology. I don't do predictive astrology because I don't think that's the best or most effective way for me to practice astrology. I personally wouldn't want people predicting, with maybe spotty accuracy, the events of my life. That's not what I use it for. So the way that I use astrology as a navigational tool is basically to look at the transits that a person is under, as well as some other elements of the chart, to let that person know what time it is in their life. Okay, so what's going on in their life and how best to navigate the conditions that are described by astrology. I'm not a person who believes that astrology that the planets are causing things. What I believe astrology does is it just describes what's actually happening. So it describes energy, it describes life, it describes nature, it describes the natural processes of planet Earth. And unfortunately, we've come to a point where most people are very disconnected with the natural timing of things, the seasons, the different flavors of the seasons, and again, these different time points. Things have sped up and have gotten so busy, and people have kind of forgotten that. So astrology is sort of a soulful language that connects you to the earth and also connects you to the heavens, right? So ultimately, the way that I practice astrology is as a spiritual art. So there is a scientific basis to astrology. There is a certain set of data, concrete data that we're working with, and that is the placements of the bodies in the signs. Okay, so there is a science behind it, but I don't believe it is a science. So there's an element of science. There's also an element of things like psychology, but I don't think that astrology is an offshoot of psychology either. Again, the way I practice it is as a spiritual art. So I am basically tuned into the unseen realms, the spirit realms, basically God. I know people don't like that word being used these days, but I do use that word. So my apologies to any atheists who are watching this and are totally disgusted right now, but that's ultimately what I believe that I'm doing. So spiritual artists are basically tapped into communication, information, impressions of the divine, right? So of the otherworldly realms, of God, of the spirit realms. And we are then translating those impressions and that information into the mundane plane, into the physical plane. And the hope and the goal for most practicing astrologers is to help people with astrology. And I will say that astrology saves lives. I'm just going to throw that out there. That's just going to be a gauntlet that I throw down there. Astrology saves lives, or it can save lives if it's practiced, responsibly, effectively, and the way that I believe it was primarily meant to be practiced. And that is as a soulful art, as, the healing power of words and the healing power of putting words to something that has just been sort of a vague complaint or a vague problem for months or years or maybe your whole life. It's putting those concrete words to your feelings and your impressions and your experience in a way that absolutely justifies and validates and just supports you in that experience, right? So it's kind of an aha moment when you're able to really pick up on what's going on with that person, you know, and whether that's the transits or whether that is a person's natal chart and just the general themes of that person's life. Astrology can be revelatory, absolutely revelatory, and also hugely empowering. It also gives us a sense of cosmic timing and also a purpose, right? So, of course, we don't always know the purpose of every event that happens in our lives. That is the mystery of this earthly experience, right? But astrology can help us to get very close to understanding why something keeps coming up again and again. Why does this experience keep happening? And what can I do to navigate this more successfully or to close the door on certain experiences that keep, repeatedly coming. Astrology can basically break you out of karmic cycles. And that is huge, 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 huge. Okay. Astrology, a good astrology reading or, finding the right astrology article at just the right time can literally save you decades of your life. Okay. Easily years of your life, easily months of your life, but I would actually go so far as to say decades of your life. Because again, astrology is such a powerful navigational tool. And so it can tell you when you're a little off course. It can tell you when you're about to, when you should really take a second look at something or think something over before you make that leap, before you make that decision. Again, it can explain certain karmic dynamics that come into your life again and again and again. One of the primary ways people use astrology is to analyze their love lives, right? Because often we have the same kinds of dynamics coming in and out, coming back into our and okay, I'm sorry about the lighting. It looks like I'm glowing. I don't know what to do about this lighting issue that I have going on. Possibly I should have turned the light on, but to offset it. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Yes, so it can sort of jump you out of karmic loops, and that is hugely powerful and hugely valuable. Something that I think most people who have benefited from astrology are hugely grateful for. I know that I am myself. So yes, as a spiritual art, it is a practice that cannot be standardized. It cannot be homogenized. It cannot be put in a little box that makes it nice and neat and easily commodified and easily commercialized. Okay, there's a huge push right now for standardized astrological education, which I am opposed to as a self-taught astrologer, because my path definitely had to be carved out by me myself, okay, and by my connection to my own spiritual guidance and higher power. So again, that's a sacred process, and no one can really denigrate or delegitimize that process. I'm not sure about how it is for other astrologers, but when I became an astrologer, the first thing is that I was completely immersed in astrology. Completely. It was, it took me over for many, many, many years. And I actually also had to go through an intense amount of energetic processing and energy changes in order to become an astrologer. So one of the things that happens is that you just become more sensitive to things, to pretty much everything, because your job is really to pick up on subtleties that other people would not notice or would not pay much attention to, and you're picking up these details and these insights, and you're crystallizing them, right, as part of this process. So one of the things that happens is that you become very, very sensitive, which can be quite challenging when you're trying to navigate the public world at the same time. I have had varying success with that process, with the navigation of the physical world at the same time as this is going on. The other thing that has to happen is that you have to trust your spiritual path wholeheartedly, and that takes some doing too, right? Because anyone who has followed a spiritual art path, or even just an artistic path or creative path, or any path that goes outside the mainstream, knows that it is, a lot of times it's an uphill battle, right? And it's a slog, and you have to really believe in what you're doing, because you may come into contact with huge amounts of opposition, vilification, poverty, all kinds of crazy experiences that are designed to take you into a deeper awareness that can then be valuable to other people as they're consulting you. So there's a whole raft of things that happens as you energetically become a professional astrologer. And one of the main things for me was absolute terror at not having a standard paid job, right? So one of the things I had to do was just tunnel down right into the core of me and realize, and just build that trust and know that, this path is being laid out for me for a reason. I know how to do this work. I just naturally know how to do this work. Almost as soon as I picked up my first astrology book, I knew I was going to be a professional astrologer. And that has never happened to me in my entire life. Never. Even with my previous chosen profession, which was journalism, which I still practice, my own version of self-directed journalism today on the blog. But I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like I was taking it to it like a duck to water at all. So that was the first and only time that's ever happened. And so I just knew, right? I knew I had to do this. And I think that initiatory experience is common for many astrologers. Now, I will say that my advice always to people is, if you have a different way of making a living, do that. Because it's potentially going to be very rough. It's not easy to make a living as a professional astrologer, definitely not as a professional intuitive astrologer, and definitely not as a person who practices as a sort of renegade spiritual artist such as myself, right? So that's the thing though. If you have that drive in you, if you have that passion in you, and for me ultimately there was no alternative. It was not a choice. I don't believe I had a choice to do this. This was what God had for me, and so this is what I do. Okay. So basically the point that I'm getting to here, which is kind of long-winded, is that it's very individual, and it's a soulful process for every astrologer, I believe, as far as what goes into your practice of astrology, what goes into that path, and what goes into, what sort of relationship you have with your own spirituality and your own faith, right? Your faith that this is purposeful, this is meaningful, I need to do this because I know how to do this, and it helps people and it helps the world, and it fights for the type of change that I need to see in this world and that I need to experience in this world, right? So when it's something so beautiful as that, how can you turn that down, right? So this is why the push for standardized astrological education is somewhat repugnant to me. I'm not gonna lie, and is a bit of a steamroller, a bit of a Pluto and Capricorn steamroller subject, where people, I feel, are putting their own values, forcing their own values and their own ideas and their own desire for mainstream acceptance, mainstream popularity, and also mainstream income levels. They're trying to force that on everyone and make everyone fit into that little box. Or if you don't fit into that little box, you're relegated to a fringe status, right? Fringe astrologer, who, might be good at what they do, but it's not it's not the real deal. It's not real astrology. And I will just argue that, you know, the type of astrology I do is the realist kind of astrology, right? Because it's coming from my heart and soul, and it's not coming from a book, it's not coming from a lecture, it's not coming from a particular school of astrological thought. It's coming straight from my own source, right? And my connection to all that is. So, you know, the love that everything is. So no one has the right to step on that. And I will say that I've butted up against the astrological establishment a few times now, and I've been censored a couple times. One time I was censored on a site. I wrote an article about Canada and the uranium industry, and it was tied into the astrology very well. That article was censored. I was also fairly recently censored on the main Reddit astrology page. I did an article on hurricanes Harvey and Irma and on the astrology of them, and also on the strong possibility that they were manufactured storms, so that they were weather modification, weather wars, whatever you would like to call them. And there's some fairly compelling evidence that I put forth about this. Anyway, I posted that on the Reddit astrology board. That was the first article I'd ever been compelled to share on that board. I don't normally interact on that board. But the universe must have known there was a shitstorm necessary, so, you know, throw Willow in there. So I posted my article on the board. It was taken down. I posted it again. It was taken down again. And so I basically, you know, I posted a second article on my opposition to the standardization of astrological education, and a whole huge storm of controversy was going on in the comments section. Two very vehement commenters opposing my views. And it turned out that one of the people who was opposing me was the moderator of the site, who had taken down my Hurricane Harvey article. And so I basically just challenged him on that. And he basically rolled out a statement about how at this Reddit board, we discourage any type of conspiracy research, just as we would discourage subjects like numerology or palmistry or any type of occult subjects like that. And that was absolutely mind-blowing to me, like literally mind-blowing, because I don't know a single astrologer, and I know a fair number of astrologers. I mean, sure, they're generally astrologers who are practicing similarly as I am, but I don't know a single astrologer who is opposed to numerology, palmistry, you know, psychic abilities, conspiracy research. Like, really, as long as these things are being done responsibly and effectively, what's the problem? So that was an element of this kind of standardized astrology establishment where I realized that you know, there's a huge amount of censorship going on, and there is filtering going on. So the type of astrology, the type of astrologers, the type of ideas, the type of education that is considered acceptable within this astrological establishment is not a full representation of astrology today. And I would say, if they are looking to cut out intuitive astrologers, spiritual, you know, astrologers who practice it as a spiritual art, fringe astrologers, anyone who's considered controversial in any type of way, they're absolutely gutting astrology. I mean, they're ruining astrology. That, you know, they're taking out the life and the power and the rawness of it, and that's really, to me, a huge element of what makes astrology valuable. So there is this sort of push to get us all in a neat little box, and if anyone doesn't fit into that neat little box, you know, then they're relegated to, you know, not having public standing, not having public recognition, not being included amongst the professionals, right? And that's a load of BS. I'm just gonna straight talk that one too. That is a total load of BS. And those people do not have the right to enforce their, I would say, highly limited understanding of what astrology is and what astrologers are on the whole group of astrologers and astrologers. Okay, so anyway, off the soapbox, girly, off the soapbox. But this is a really important issue for people to understand. Okay, and it's important that I think that the power of intuitive astrology, the power of astrology as a spiritual art, not be diluted, not be hindered by these rules that are trying to be sort of forced upon the practice of astrology. I know that my voice is most powerful when it is purely honest, purely authentic, right down to the nitty gritty, speaking the truth, telling the truth. That's when people really respond to what I'm doing, and that's when I feel I'm in the sweet spot and I'm really putting out some important stuff. Okay. So anyway, that's ultimately my personal practice of astrology. Astrology itself is practiced in many different ways, and I can respect different ways of practicing astrology. What I cannot respect, though, is the dumbing down of astrology that is going on. Well, that has been going on for decades now. Astrology as entertainment only, and as I would suggest, diversion only. So most of the astrology that the mainstream public comes into contact with is pretty fluffy. It's pretty, simplistic. It's not hugely in depth. It's not hugely soulful. It's, maybe a little hit or miss. And, I think that that's being done for a reason, honestly. I think there's this glut of kind of pop astrology, which is, entertainment-based astrology, kind of like the Taylor Swift of astrology. And basically, or the Justin Bieber of astrology, whatever you want to say it. Basically, people are, rightfully kind of rejecting that stuff and saying, oh, that's a bunch of garbage, that's a bunch of hogwash. But the vast majority of people have never come into contact with astrology practiced in a deep and responsible and legitimate way. I'll just say that. So, there isn't really, you can't really form an opinion on astrology based on newspaper horoscopes or based on some meme that you see on Facebook. Those memes, oh God, like the mistakes in those and the errors in those are just like, they kind of drive me nuts. So, newspaper and magazine horoscopes are, and I'm not denigrating them because I know people like those things, right? And they can be very well done. And there can be times where it's like, it's just like reading your mind, it's reading your life right there. So I'm not saying that there isn't value to that. What I'm saying is that's a very tiny sliver of what astrology really is. So those horoscopes are based on the sun sign, generally. So that is one body in one sign, but we actually have every body in the solar system in a sign. We also have asteroids. We have, just points that are calculated. They aren't even full bodies. We have a full, rich picture, full, rich astrology to actually work with. And so sun sign horoscopes that you read in a newspaper or magazine or online, whatever, are just one tiny sliver of how astrology is actually used. Okay. So to understand your full astrological makeup, you need to learn about your birth chart. Okay. You may need to learn about your secondary progress chart as well as a secondary lens. There's a lot of information that needs to kind of be synthesized, and I'll put a photo up of an actual astrological chart right here, and you can see that this is a real system. This is real. Again, there's a scientific basis to it. There is data that we're working with, but there's also the art element, which I believe is the stronger element, which is the interpretation. and the expression and the choices, right? In what you express and how you express it, and what you don't express and how you don't express it, right? So it's really, it's an art form using words, using potentially tone, the sound of voice. Um, it's a it's a real complex system that's being used. So you can learn about your own chart. So that will basically tell you characteristics and themes of you and your life. And that can be very revelatory. Then you can also do readings of the transits in comparison to your birth chart. So that basically tells you how the current placements are acting upon you, or are acting upon your life. Or again, I don't believe it's a causal thing, but it's describing something that is acting upon your life, right? So different planets have different flavors to them. Okay, so Venus is the love planet. So if Venus is acting on your chart in a particular way, that may be a time when relationships come to the forefront, or art, or money. Those are all Venus related subjects. Mars is related to action and goals and personal direction and sex. So when Mars is strong, either in your transits, or if you have a strong placement natally, that's going to that's going to bring up those themes in life. Saturn relates to the passing of time and coming of age and earning your stripes and challenges and obstacles and areas of weakness that over time, with enough effort, become areas of mastery. Okay. The Saturn return, most people know about the Saturn return. It happens around age 28, 29. That's when people have to start getting their shit together a little bit, So if you don't know that, if you don't know this is coming down the pipe, and you're still living like you're 23, 22, 21 years old, and you're 28, 29, 30 years old, Saturn is going to start tightening the vice on you, right? It's going to start squeezing you into a more responsible and streamlined and mature life path. So these are the kinds of things that astrology can do. As I say, astrology can save you years, even decades of time, based on just basically helping you to make better choices and better decisions, considering your conditions and considering your circumstances. Astrology can save lives because it can show you that what you're dealing with is a transit. Okay, so what you're dealing with is a challenging planet. Okay, and again, I don't believe in causation, but I do know astrology is bang on in a lot of respects. So if you were under, for example, if Pluto is forming a conjunction to your natal moon, that can be a time of just emotional annihilation, literally just hell, emotional hell, and a feeling that, again, like, you're stuck here. This is, things are terrible, things are bleak, and things are always going to be this bleak, right? That's not true. That is not true. Okay. That's never true. No matter how dark and bleak things have gotten. And believe me, I've been there many, many times myself. The wheel of fortune always changes. It always turns, right? So you might just get better at dealing with the crappy conditions that you have, or you might actually completely overcome the crappy conditions that you had. But what astrology will show you is that, number one, it's a transit, so it's not permanent. Things are going to be changing. There's a timing to it. There's a cosmic timing to it. And astrology can get extremely precise as far as that timing, as far as how long this is going to last, and when things are going to be worse and when things are going to be a little bit better. And just, again, how to navigate these changes and what's going on. Okay, Mars retrograde station. We just went through Mars retrograde station. That is a time, unfortunately, that could be associated with suicide risk, right? Because it's basically the action planet is stopped in the zodiac and is starting to turn back, appear to move backwards through the zodiac. So basically, it can feel like all is lost. You know, what you were striving for, you're not going to reach it. You know, your goals are a sham. There's no point to continuing, etc., right? And this is all stirred up because of, you know, you're experiencing something that is temporary, right? But that is extremely challenging to the extreme. Mars Saturn squares, those are also related to suicide risks. So, and I mean, I see this sad and horrible thing is that I see it all the time, right? I see these Mars Saturn squares, and then I see some type of public figures in the news, you know, suicide. And I just think, oh, if only that person could have gotten a good astrology reading. You know, number one, if only that person could realize the legitimacy of astrology and how helpful it can be. And number two, if that person could only have access to a good astrologer at that time, I know I can talk people off the ledge, and I know I have. I've talked myself off the ledge many times. So I know the power of it. I know that, you know, it can change people's lives and it can save people's lives. Because you come into these acute points, right? And it just seems like everything's terrible, and it's always going to be this terrible, and you know, things are always going to be this difficult, and there's no way out, and it's a rock and a hard place. I mean, that is textbook Mars square Saturn, okay? And the thing is that that's not the case, okay? So if you can just get up and out of that, even just a little bit, that is huge. That just buys you some time. It buys you some breathing space. You know, it's hugely valuable. You know, there are a lot of people who are kind of almost embarrassed to say that they practice astrology, even professional astrologers. And, you know, I have a feeling, you know, I have to say, I don't respect that. I cannot respect that in a person. I can kind of understand it, but I don't respect that because I know the absolute depth and power of astrology. I know how valuable it is. I know that it has saved my life, and I know that it saves other people's lives. I know that it has saved people years or decades of their lives to get a reading from me, okay, or to read an article from me. And I'm not tooting my own horn here because again, this doesn't just come from me. It's a collaboration with whatever's there, right? But I know the power of this stuff, and so I love astrology with my whole heart, and I will wear my heart on my sleeve for astrology. I will yell from the rooftops how wonderful, amazing, powerful, soulful, special astrology is when it is practiced correctly and responsibly. And I will shout my love for astrology from now to eternity, through eternity. There's no embarrassment in me at all. Now, I have been treated poorly and am regularly treated poorly when people find out that I am an astrologer. Often kind of mocked a little bit, or it's very downplayed. It's not considered a real profession. It's not considered a real job, a real career. You know, I was actually disowned by my family members when I first started studying astrology because they just were so horrified by the turn that my life had taken, the change that my life had taken. And I will say, for a person who's very rootsy and soulful, to have your family turn on you and really, you know, cut you out of their lives for a time, you know, because you're doing this. I mean, it requires fairly substantial sacrifice, you know, and so I know what goes into this type of practice. And I have the utmost respect for people who have rocked it, who have taken that path, and who have just, you know, done a masterful job with it. Because it is not easy, okay? It's not easy. And probably one of the hardest things is the fact that there's no foothold as far as public recognition or any type of respect for this as a profession. And I definitely always try to do my part to change that, and doing a video like this is part of that, trying to change the perception around astrology. All I can say is that most people have not experienced real astrology, and not most people have not experienced a true initiated soul-driven astrologer. That's the way of it. Okay. So as far as the public perception and the public opinions, they have to be taken with a grain of salt because they're very, very limited in scope, right? They're very limited. So anyway, this is what astrology is to me, what my practice of astrology is, and that's obviously different from astrologer to astrologer. My crew, as far as my astrology comrades, colleagues, are generally professional intuitive astrologers. They're generally self-taught. They're generally very spiritual people, strong spiritual faith. And they're generally hardcore mama jamas. They're hardcore people. They're souls that are here to make a difference, to change things, and they're willing to put themselves on the line to do it. So my hat is off to all of you hardcore astrologers out there, doing this often thankless work, this behind the scenes work that is so important. Okay. So thank you for having the courage and the bravery to keep doing it. And, I want to make it easier for us to do this, but I want to make it easier for us to do it our way. Okay. Not in any standardized way, not in any homogenized way. We've earned the right to do it our way, and we've earned the right. The world needs us to do it our way. That's the long and short of it. Okay. The world needs the fringe people, the controversial people, the people who don't fit into the standardized boxes. Astrology needs that, and the world needs that as well. So I hope this has given a little bit of insight into what astrology is. Again, just to sum up, it is a nature-based symbolic language. It is a navigational tool. It is a healing modality, and it is a spiritual art. All rolled into one beautiful, beautiful practice. And so I would encourage you to delve into real astrology a little bit more, delve into real astrologers a little bit more, and support the astrologers that you appreciate. Support the astrologers that you gain value from, because, no one can work for free. And this is most certainly work, okay? Even though it's not necessarily recognized on the public stage at this time. Acupuncture in the 1970s, as early as the 1970s, was not considered a legitimate practice either, okay? So, there are lots of modalities that have kind of had to fight a little bit to become legitimized, and astrology is one of those. Again, there are a lot of charlatans out there. There are a lot of people practicing watered down, what I would call soft astrology, which basically just kind of uses some key phrases, some catch phrases, does not use the real system of astrology. These people don't have a mastery with astrology. I have had situations where I've met someone and I've told them that I'm a professional astrologer, and within weeks, that person is calling themselves a professional astrologer. Yeah, no. You don't get to be a professional astrologer in weeks. You don't get to be a professional astrologer in months. You don't even get to be a professional astrologer in years, necessarily, okay? Well, many years, okay? But this is not an easy process. This is not an easy thing to take on. If you take on too much at once, and if you're practicing incorrectly without proper initiation and training, I think astrology could actually kill you, okay? Or it could actually screw your life up in a severe way, okay? So the amount of responsibility that an initiated, soul-driven professional astrologer has is high, pristine, very strong standards, because we know what would happen if we were lax on those standards, and we can't accept those consequences. Okay, so when you're accessing a legitimate astrologer, they're actually going to be terrified to lead you astray. They're going to be, you know what I mean? They're going to be absolutely focused on the best information to give you at this time and the best support and guidance to give you at this time. And they are not going to add in any unnecessary drama or woo-woo or unicorns and sparkles and rainbows shooting out your bum. That's not going to be part of an astrology reading. Is it going to be spiritually uplifting? Almost undoubtedly it will be. Even again, just having that level of deep validation is spiritually uplifting. But astrology is not a gimmick. Astrology is not a game. It's not a parlor trick. Okay? No, I can't guess your sign because I don't care enough to guess your sign. I'm sorry. It's not of interest to me. It's not the best use of my time or energy to guess what sign you are. And then maybe be wrong, and then, oh, I'm obviously a terrible astrologer because I can't guess your sign. You know, it's all crazy. It's all craziness. Astrology is not meant to be used as a tool to become obsessive with love relationships. I will also put that on the record. People often use it that way, unfortunately, where they are comparing charts and they're literally obsessing over, how do I get him to love me? How do I get him to, give up his other girlfriend? How do I, it's too much. Okay. So, ultimately astrology, I believe, is used to change the world. And yes, you do change it one person at a time, but you also change it on the macro level as well. Astrology is meant to be used as a tool to deconstruct illegitimate power structures as well. It's meant to be used as a tool to analyze global issues, socio-political issues, the crucial issues of the day. I really do believe that. And I would love to see more of that going on and a little bit less of the personal drama and the narcissism, the obsession with every little element of your birth chart and that kind of thing. I can see how it can get fascinating like that for a little while, but then you have to realize that it's about more than just your own little bubble, and then you do have to sort of look bigger picture and take it a little bit broader than that. There's a lot of crappy astrology out there. There are a lot of people passing themselves off as real astrologers when they are not real astrologers. They're using, again, catch terms, little sexy words, sexy phrases to kind of, bring into what they're doing. But in order to be a real full-fledged professional astrologer, it's all in. Okay. You're not going to pick that up in a matter of weeks. You're not going to pick that up in a weekend conference or a weekend course. You're just not. Okay. You're not going to have a full mastery, and you're not going to be initiated to the point where you're not making mistakes, right? Or if you do make a little mistake, you correct yourself immediately. You literally have to be initiated layer by layer into the depth of awareness, and again, the sensitivity, and also the ability to translate and to express what you're seeing and what you're picking up. You have to be initiated into that process layer by layer. And that is something that's sacred. That is something that's driven by the higher power, not by an individual. As much as an individual might want to speed ahead and promote themselves as a professional astrologer immediately, it's just not wise. Okay. So what I would encourage you to do is use your own intuition as far as legitimate astrology versus non-legitimate astrology. Now, astrology that is entertainment based, sure, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I would say it's just a waste of precious energy and time on planet Earth. I think there could be better uses of that public platform and of that astrology. But I mean, that sort of goes across the board at this point, that the hugest public platforms are often doing the least good on this planet, unfortunately. And if a person is involved in entertainment and diversion and and the cult of image, they're not doing what astrology is really meant to do, which is peel the layers and cut through the Maya and the bullshit and get down to core soul level reality, because that's the really powerful point that we can all then work with. So yes, astrology is a serious discipline. It's a serious profession. It's a spiritual vocation. It's a spiritual vocation that often is required of people. Okay, so it's not a choice to necessarily do this. It's something that needs to be done because we know how to do it and the world needs us to do it. Okay, so for all the spiritual artists out there, astrologers and otherwise, for all the hardcore mama jamas who are out there day after day, digging through the crap, rejecting the lies, rejecting the manipulations, going to the core of the matter, exposing the truth, even when it's detrimental to yourself, your own security, your own social standing, your own professional standing. Those are the people I really respect, okay? It's not about popularity. It's not about getting 500,000 hits on your YouTube video. It's not about Twitter likes or Facebook likes or Instagram followers. It's not about that, okay? It's about something deeper than that. And if you have Instagram followers and if you have a big following because of the power of the work that you're doing, great, that's fantastic. But ultimately, the popularity level is often an inverse relation to the potency and effectiveness of the work, unfortunately, right? So if you're really going to the core of the matter, most people aren't really going to want to be around that. They're going to want diversion and the entertainment-based stuff and the Maya-based stuff, right? They're not going to want that hardcore reality check-in version. But for me, that's the only version that there is. And I think that for anyone who's attracted to me as an astrologer, or who's interested in what I'm putting out, or who benefits from what I'm putting out, that's the only way there is to go. So with that, thank you, astrology, for everything you give us and everything that you provide for the world. And I see a bright and shining future ahead for astrology in general, but also for professional intuitive astrologers, for astrologers as spiritual artists. I see a future where the spiritual arts are brought into the fold of the conventional arts, where it's legitimized and it's considered a real legitimate art form, because it is. Okay, that's something that I would love to see. We generally get into this realm where visual artists and performing artists are kind of put on a pedestal. They're hero worship. They have kind of this like superhero vibe created around them. And, I'm not a fan of that in general. But the problem is that other art forms are just as legitimate and just as important, but they're not kind of being accepted and being brought into that world in a way that is, I guess, fully legitimized and fully, respectful of their due place. So I see a lot of work that needs to be done on this subject, on this front, as far as legitimizing professional astrology. But I absolutely do not think that standardizing astrology or standardizing astrological education, sorry, tongue twister, is the way to do that. What I think is the way to do that is just each individual astrologer continuing to put out awesome work and continuing to help people in really profound ways, and in joining together and legitimizing ourselves and validating ourselves in this profession that we do in the world every single day. So with that, this video has turned out to be a lot longer than I was hoping, as usual. So wordy. God, Willow, so wordy. But anyway, I hope that it will provide a little bit of insight if someone is coming newly to the subject of astrology, or anyone who is, well versed in the subject. Astrology kicks ass. Sorry for the double sign there, but it does.